Hello everyone and welcome to my guide on how to build a PC. This video we will be covering the basics needed to build a PC and how to cable manage. Not in depth however, because cable management is a skill in its own right, but just so it looks, out of place. Without further ado, let's get straight into the first component you need, which is a CPU. Now right here, ladies and gentlemen, I have an Intel CPU. Let me just focus. I have an Intel CPU. The installation process is a bit different on AMD, but on Intel you generally want to find this golden triangle right here and match it up with an indented triangle that will be located generally around here. Now, of course, my camera isn't very great, so you probably can't see it. However, I will put up a picture right now on what it looks like. Anyway, you want to line up those two triangles, and once you have you just simply slot the CPU in like that, make sure it's nice and snug, and then put this retaining shield down. Now it may feel like you're breaking the board when you're doing this because it requires quite a bit of force, but you're not actually breaking the board. Boards are very resilient and they will handle this amount of stress. Right, now I've got the CPU installed. Next it's time for the cooler. Right, ladies and gentlemen, before you install your cooler you will need a tube of thermal paste. Now generally I just recommend a pea-sized little dot in the middle, just about enough right there. Don't worry if it comes out looking a bit naff. Sometimes they do, thermal paste tubes are quite unpredictable. But, that being besides the point, all you need to do now is just fit your cooler on. Now obviously your cooler might be different, so I recommend referring to your manual. This one is just a stock cooler. I'm going to speed through me installing this because it's quite finicky. Right everyone, so I have now installed my cooler and now I'm going to install the RAM. So if you want to install the RAM, you clip these back on your motherboard. Now your motherboard may only have 2 clips, but in general you just want to clip these back. Take your RAM, of which I have DDR3. DDR4 is going to be slightly different. Sorry, my camera keeps going out of focus there, ladies and gentlemen. But you want to align this notch up with this notch on the motherboard and slide it in. Like so. And once you've made sure that it's all correct, you clasp down on it until it slides into place like that. Do the same for the other one as well. And that's your RAM installed. Of course, like I said, it is different for DDR4. However, it is generally the same process. Look for the notch, line up the notch with the notch on the RAM, and slide it in. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we get to our next part, which is installing your power supply. Now, obviously, I've got my power supply in the case. However, if you don't have your power supply already in the case, that's fine. What you want to do to mount it in the case is take your power supply, look for these screw holes, and these screw holes right here. Now let me just screw in the power supply for you to show you. So you want to line them up, like so. As you can see, the holes are poking out of these holes, and you want to take your power supply screws, which should look like this. And screw them in. I'm just going to fast forward this screwing process because it's quite... Right, so now we have the power supply installed. Now next what we want to do is install the motherboard. Now to install your motherboard you first want to pay attention to this I/O shield which goes at the back. You want to flip it this side inwards. These tabs go inwards so they poke out like this. And you basically just want to slot it in there and just kind of finicky around with it until it fits. Now I/O shields are very finicky and it doesn't help that this case was quite cheap. Right, ladies and gentlemen, that is the I/O shield now installed. Now for the actual installation of the motherboard. So, for the installation of the motherboard, you would want to pay attention to these standoffs. Now, most cases have them pre-installed, but if yours doesn't, follow the manual on how to install. Right, so you just take your motherboard and line these holes on the motherboard up with these holes on the actual case. Now make sure to move any wires or anything like that out of the way so that you aren't accidentally pinning down any wires. Yeah, and now you just line the motherboard up and screw it in. Right, so now we've got the motherboard fully aligned. Now we just use these screws right here to screw it in. Alright everyone, now we have the motherboard installed and the next thing we are going to install is the graphics card. Now first, before you install your graphics card, you want to make sure that nothing is obstructing this area near the graphics card. You don't have any connectors you want to plug in here before you plug in the graphics card, because if you do, it's going to make it hard to plug them in after you've installed the graphics card. With that being said, let's move on to installing the graphics card. So, to install your graphics card, you want to make sure that the graphics card is facing cooler down, and you want to make sure that this little toggle here is unlocked. Now, you want to match up this part on the graphics card with that right there. That little notch right there. You just match those up on the PCI 16X connector. Make sure they're in the correct place. Let me just give you a better look here. Match that up and it should slot in like this, and then just push down on it and it slots down nicely. Now you want to pay attention to this little part back here. This is a screw hole. This is the PCI bracket screw, and you want to have a screw to screw that in with. Luckily I have one right here. So now we just simply screw it in. May look awkward at an angle here, but don't worry. This is a bit finicky, ladies and gentlemen, because it's so hard to reach. But easy as that. We're now screwing it in. And it is now in. Now onto the next component which you might want to install, which is the hard drive. Now a lot of people would either have M.2 SSDs or normal SSDs. The 2.5 inch SSD installation process is basically the same, however an NVMe SSD process is a bit different, and for that I'd like to direct you to a different video, because the current M.2 SSD that I have is in my system, which is over on the other desk, and I don't want to take it apart. So I'm going to direct you to another video that shows perfectly how to install one. Anyway, without further ado, let's install the hard drive. Okay, so to install your hard drive, you need to locate your drive bay. In this specific case, it is right over here. Right down in there. What you want to do is take your hard drive and slot it into the drive bay. Now we've got our hard drive slotted into the drive bay. Now all we need to do is screw it in. Keep in mind there's also a screw at the back, or there is in this case. Now this screw is a bit more difficult to get to, however, should be easy enough. So you just uncover the screw hole and again take your screw here. And once you've got your hard drive installed. Right, now that we've got all of our components installed, it is time for the long and arduous process of cabling. Now I always recommend starting with the 24-pin cable. This will plug into this 24-pin port on the motherboard. Keep in mind the direction of which it goes. There should be a little clasp on the connector itself, as you can see right there. It looks like a little blue tab. Line that up with this little click on there and just simply slot it in. Now this may be a bit finicky, so don't worry if it takes a while. Don't stress it. Gently now, wiggle it in. Just gently wiggle it in. Make sure it's nice, and then make sure that contact, that clasp, goes over the blue notch. In my case it's on. Just need to wiggle a little bit more to get all those connectors right in place. And it's on. Great. Now we move on to the next connector, which is the 8-pin CPU connector. Now this will not always be 8-pin. This one is 8-pin, but it goes into a 4-pin slot. That's okay. All you really need to do is just slot it in. Make sure you again be aware of this connector. A little notch there, line that up with this notch, and then simply just slot it in. And there you go. This one's rather easy. Now, some motherboards may have an 8-pin slot. That's fine. Just follow the same step. Now, on to the graphics card power, which is powered by a 6+2-pin PCIe connector, which will look like this. And what you want to do is, this is a 6-pin graphics card, so it only requires this connector. However, if you do have an 8-pin graphics card, you can also use the +2. Since we've only got a 6-pin one, again, line this clip up with that clip right there, and simply just clip it on. Make sure it's nice and tight. And now onto the next component, which is the hard drive. For the hard drive, you want to flip this over for better access. Don't worry about anything falling out. You want to find one of these, which is a SATA power, and you want to bring it around the other side of the case. And make sure you line this L up with that. See, it looks like an L-shaped connector, yeah? Make sure the L-shaped connector is lined up correctly. And simply just slot it in like so. Now, next thing you'd want is a SATA data connector. Now you'll notice that this looks similar to the SATA power connector in that it's the L-shaped design. Now again, this is pretty simple. You just want to go down here, make sure the L matches up with the L on here, and simply just plug it in. And that's it done. You will also need to connect a SATA data to your motherboard as well, and that will look like those little blue connectors over there. And you simply take the cable, that one right there, and plug it in. Your USB front panel connector. Now obviously if you have a modern case, this is an old PC that I had laying around. If you had a modern case, then this USB would be a USB 3. I will show you a picture on a basic installation of that, but basically if you're installing one of these, all you've got to do is find one of those connectors down there, line the holes on the actual connector up with those, and slot it in. And there you go. Now on to the next. Find the connector, which is right here on this case, right over there, and you slot it in. Like so. Beautiful. Now obviously you can see the cable management in this case is not very good. In my actual case, it's a lot better, but since we are working with what we've got, I am not cable managing. Now on to the next connector, which is your fan connector. This will either be a 3-pin or a 4-pin variant, and you just have to find a little connector that looks exactly like that. All you do is line up the pins and connect it like that. Bang, you're done. Now the 3-pin variants will be very similar to this. Obviously if you've got a different proprietary fan connection, I would again recommend you to go to your manual and check that out. Now onto the next connector. The front panel connectors. Now these are especially finicky. These are known to bust your fingers up. So I'd recommend reading your manual before you do anything. I'm just going to skip to when these are already installed because they take a long time to install. General gist of it is line these labels up with the labels on your motherboard and you should be fine. If you need any further help from that, again, the manual is always the best choice. In PC building, manuals are your friend. Right, so that concludes the build process. Now we need to turn the PC on. Now unfortunately, I don't have enough space in my current setup to do anything because I've got my PC and all that there, so I'm going to have to work out some junky way of hooking this up. But I think I can make it work, so bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a video signal. Ignore that right there, that's because I turned it on about 5 times just to get this shot. But anyway, like I said, we've got a video signal and the PC's on. Now, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, I hope it helped you. If you need anything at all, comment and I will help you. Thank you for watching and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.
Hello, do you receive my echo? My life is a party.